I still remember that morning like it was yesterday. Sunlight filtered through the thin curtains, casting long, golden streaks across the worn wooden floor. The house felt unnaturally quiet, as if every creak, every small sound was amplified in the emptiness. But the silence wasn't peaceful, it was heavy, pressing down on my chest. Every breath my mum took, every heartbeat of mine, seemed stretched to the breaking point. My mum lay in bed, her hands trembling as she held the diagnosis. Her eyes were red, swollen from crying. I sat beside her, holding her cold hand as tightly as I could, trying to give her some warmth, some hope. But my own heart ached. Breast cancer wasn't just a disease, was a nightmare consuming the person I loved most. I was only 17, too young to face mortality so directly, too inexperienced to understand the depth of loss. And yet, here I was, forced to confront it. My dad, the man I had always trusted, was rarely home. Business trips, long hours, and constant work, those were the reasons he gave. But deep down, I didn't believe them anymore. Every time he left, a void grew in my chest. A father should have been there, should have protected us, but he was gone. My aunt and grandmother took care of my mum, filling in the gaps, but nothing could replace the absence of my father. The loneliness was suffocating. Those days, the house felt split into two worlds. On one side, my mum with her illness, her fatigue, her fragility. On the other, my dad, wrapped up in his work and distance. I became part child, part caregiver. Every morning, I woke up hoping my mum would be okay, only to feel my heart tighten, seeing her in pain. I remember one particular afternoon. Mum sat in the armchair, eyes closed, breathing softly. I stepped closer, reaching for her hand, only to feel it cold and weak. She opened her eyes and gave me a faint smile, the kind that tried to reassure but didn't quite reach her soul. I didn't dare cry. I forced myself to be calm, even as my heart screamed at night. When everyone else had gone to bed, I would sit by the window, staring out at the quiet street. The dim streetlights cast long shadows, and the wind rustled through the trees, painting moving patterns on the floor. I felt so small, so powerless against the world outside, against my mum's suffering, and against my dad's absence. I told myself I had to be strong. I had no choice. Days blended into one another. I learned to hide my tears, to smile when someone looked at me, to keep my composure in tense moments. If I broke down, it would only worry my mum more. And my dad, he would never understand. I had to be strong for all of us. Sometimes I watched my dad from afar as he prepared for yet another long trip. Anger surged inside me. How could he leave now when Mum needed him more than ever? How could he just walk away when the most important person in his life was struggling to breathe? But I stayed silent, inhaling deeply, reminding myself to hold back, to endure. The summer sunlight continued to stream across the yard, but it no longer felt warm. It only highlighted the pain, the emptiness, the abandonment. I realized that growing up didn't mean laughing through happiness. It meant standing firm when everything around you was falling apart. One evening, while tidying Mum's room, I found an old diary. The pages were smudged with tears, chronicling fears, unfinished dreams, and worries about family. I read line after line, hearing my mum's fragile voice echoing in my mind. Pain welled up, tears streamed down my face, but alongside it came a new strength. If my dad wasn't here, if our family was incomplete, I had to rise up, care for Mum, and one day, protect myself too. I began noticing the smallest details in the house, every cup on the table, every crack in the wall, every soft breath of my mum. Each thing was a heartbeat reminding me of life's fragility. Each gesture, each word from my parents suddenly felt precious, worthy of being treasured. Time passed. I learned to care for my mum without expecting my dad's help. I learned to do everything on my own, from preparing meals to taking her to the hospital, from comforting my grandmother to calming my aunt. I felt myself growing stronger, but I also realized that my dad's absence had left a permanent void. It wasn't just the absence of a father, it was a loss of trust, a loss of security, and in a rare moment of stillness, I looked out the window, watching the golden afternoon sunlight hit the old house. It no longer felt warm. It illuminated everything: my pain, my emptiness, my helplessness. I understood then that from this moment on, my life would enter a new chapter. A chapter of resilience, independence, and challenges I had never faced before. That night, I lay beside the empty bed, heart heavy with worry, yet burning with determination. I would never let anyone, even my dad, break my spirit or my life again. In the darkness of the old room, I began to learn what it truly meant to grow up from pain, to draw strength from absence, and to love myself before I could ever love anyone else. After the first few months of confronting my mum's illness, I began to understand just how much my life had changed. Every day was no longer a normal day of school, laughter with friends, or quiet evenings at home. My days had turned into a cycle of worry, fear, and responsibility. I had become part child, part caregiver, and fully aware of everything happening around my family. I had to listen, to manage, and to control my own emotions so as not to make my mum more exhausted each morning. I woke with a tightness in my chest. Watching my mum eat a spoonful of thin porridge, I felt both deep love and simmering anger. Love for her enduring so much pain, anger at my dad for his continued absence, leaving my mum to fight alone. His long business trips didn't feel like work anymore. They felt like a quiet betrayal, a willful abandonment while my mum suffered. My aunt and grandmother were always there, cooking, cleaning, comforting my mum, but even their love had limits. No one could replace my father, the man who should have been holding her hand through the pain, holding me when I needed comfort. I learned to hide my emotions, to smile when my aunt asked if I wanted something to eat, to stay calm when my grandmother tried to reassure my mum that everything would be okay. Yet, deep inside, I was unbearably lonely. I would sit by the window in my room, watching other kids laugh and run outside, feeling hollow. I wished I could forget the sickness, forget the fear, forget the sense of abandonment, but the pain clung to me like a shadow that refused to leave. The nights were the hardest. I would sit beside my mum's bed, listening to her soft breaths and coughs, wondering how she could endure it all. I learned to watch every small detail, how she closed her eyes when pain struck, how her hands trembled over the blanket, how she looked at me with worry but still forced a smile. Each gesture made my heart ache, but it also taught me resilience, how to recognize vulnerability without losing myself. During this time, I began to see my father more clearly, not through words, but through absence. Each trip, each brief phone call reminded me he wasn't really here. I felt both anger and disappointment, but I also knew I had no choice but to accept reality. I had to take care of things myself, protect my mum, and eventually protect myself. I remember one night when my mum was too weak to sit up. I carefully helped her to a chair. She looked at me with tear-filled eyes and said in a fragile voice, "I'm sorry you have to carry so much." My chest tightened. I wanted to yell, "It's okay, Mom." But instead, I held her hand tighter and whispered, "It's okay, Mom. I'm here. You don't have to worry." The words were half a lie, couldn't change her suffering, but they were all I had to reassure both of us. The long days went on, and I became stronger. I learned to cook, administer medicine, take her to appointments, manage the house. I learned to face injustice, absence, and simmering anger without letting it spill over. I stopped expecting anyone to save. My dad certainly wouldn't. Everything depended on me. But alongside that growth, the emotional exhaustion was real. I often lay awake at night, wondering if I could keep going, if my mum could survive. Every cough felt like a knife in my heart, a reminder that her time was limited. I had learned to stay calm when she was in pain, but deep down, tears and frustration surged uncontrollably. In those moments of desperation, I found comfort in my mum's diary. Pages smeared with tears revealed fears, unfulfilled dreams, and concerns about the family. I read line after line, hearing her fragile voice whispering in my mind. Pain surged, but so did strength. If my mum had to endure this alone, if my dad couldn't show love, I had to be her support, and someday, mine as well. In the darkness of my small room, I began to protect my own heart. I learned resilience from absence, endurance from pain, and how to perceive the world with more mature eyes, where every word, every gesture, every moment held weight. Slowly, I realized that growing up isn't about happiness or joy. It's about standing tall in the face of challenges, staying true to yourself, and loving without expectation. I learned to look at the void my dad left not only with anger, but with understanding that from now on, I had to carve my own path. Each day, I grew both weary and stronger. I knew that the real challenges were still ahead, that loss and pain didn't end here. But those long, dark days taught me one essential truth. No one, not even my father, would break my spirit again. I began to feel strength in the midst of pain, courage in solitude, and determination to forge my own life. The day my mum passed away was one of the darkest days of my life. I remember the chilling silence that filled the house, the kind of silence that presses down on your chest and leaves you gasping. No soft breaths, no fragile smiles, just a cold emptiness and a pain that words could never capture. I stood frozen by her bed, tears streaming down my face, my heart feeling like it might shatter into 1,000 pieces. The emptiness spread through me like poison. I hadn't just lost the person I loved most, I had lost my anchor, my emotional safe haven. Mum had always understood me, protected me, and taught me how to be strong and compassionate. Now she was gone, leaving me alone with grief and a nameless, searing anger. But the pain didn't stop there. A few months after her passing, I discovered a truth that shattered me completely. My dad had betrayed her. While she was fighting cancer, he had been having an affair. The long business trips, the excuses for his absence or lies, masks hiding the reality of his betrayal. When I learned the truth, a storm of rage consumed me. I felt like the ground beneath me had disappeared. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to punish him for what he had done to Mum, to me, to our family. All the feelings of abandonment, helplessness, and loneliness from the past years coalesced into a tempest in my chest. I remember the day I confronted him. He introduced me to the woman he had been seeing, the one he had been with for 3 years, right under Mum's nose while she was dying. I couldn't hold back. I yelled, my voice shaking with anger, betrayal, and grief. You betrayed Mum while she was alive. How could you do this? He didn't respond. His face was cold, unreadable, as if my words hadn't even touched him. His silence cut deeper than any argument ever could. I realized then that he hadn't just betrayed Mum, he had betrayed me, the trust I had placed in him. I packed my things, left the house, and I haven't spoken to him since that day. Life after that became a long stretch of loneliness and coping with loss. I lived with my Antha, only person who truly stood by me during that horrific time. She became my source of comfort, understanding, and even an outlet for the anger I couldn't express. But I knew I couldn't expect anyone else to face this truth for me, to deal with the deep, searing betrayal I felt in the months that followed. I had to confront every overwhelming emotion, grief over losing Mum, fury at my dad, the pain of betrayal, and disappointment in those around me who knew the truth but did nothing. I came to understand that growing up isn't just about being resilient in pain. It's about standing alone when everyone else turns away. During this time, I began to see myself differently. I was no longer the little child who leaned on her parents. I had to learn how to take care of myself, to control my emotions, and to protect my heart from those who didn't deserve it. I realized that surviving this pain meant becoming stronger than anyone thought I could be. I remember sitting alone in my empty room, looking at old photos of Mum. Tears streamed down my face. I felt anguish and anger in equal measure. But in that storm of emotion, I found a strange kind of strength. I realized that even if my dad had betrayed us, even if life was cruel, I still had the power to choose how I lived. I had the right to refuse forgiveness, to keep him dead in my mind, and to decide that no one other than him could manipulate my feelings again. In the months that followed, I began to establish boundaries. I refused to see him, refused to listen to any explanations or apologies. Every call, every text, I ignored. I learned that life could go on without the approval or forgiveness of the person who had caused the greatest pain. Forgiveness is not an obligation, it's a choice. And I wasn't ready to make that choice. Alongside anger and hurt, I learned to navigate my remaining family relationships. My aunt and grandmother remained my support, but they could not replace my father. Everyone has limits. I realized that sometimes growing up doesn't mean leaning on others, means standing firm on your own. Mom's death and the harsh truth about my father changed me forever. I learned that life isn't fair. People can betray you, but how I faced that pain would define who I am. I began to recognize the latent strength within me, the capacity to endure, and the ability to rise after the most devastating shock of my life. From that day on, I made a firm decision. My father was dead to me, and no one, not even him, would ever invade my mental space again. I learned to turn pain into motivation, betrayal into a lesson, and prepared myself for the challenges that lay ahead. After Mum's death and the harsh truth about my father, I had learned to live in solitude. I found a small measure of peace with my aunt, my grandmother, and created a tiny, stable life for myself. I went to school, worked part-time, and tried to keep my heart calm. But one day, everything flipped upside down when my father reappeared, not with an apology or remorse, but with an event that reignited all my old wounds. It was an early summer afternoon. Soft golden sunlight filtered through the trees outside my window. I was tidying up my small apartment, listening to light music, trying to push away painful memories. Suddenly, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but something in my gut told me this wouldn't be an ordinary call. "Hey, I want to see you." My father's voice came through, low and strangely shaky. My chest tightened. Everything froze. I had learned long ago not to let him intrude into my life, to lock my heart and boundaries away. But now, that voice felt like an old wound tearing open. The days Mum suffered, the endless absences, the cruel betrayal, it all came rushing back. I shouted into the phone, "You are dead to me. Don't ever show up again." Then I hung up. Everything inside me erupted: anger, disappointment, hurt, and the loneliness I'd buried for years. I sank to the floor, head in my hands, feeling as if all the pain of my life had come crashing down at once. But just a few days later, he showed up outside my apartment. I had never seen him like this, standing there. Yet his presence felt like a storm battering my soul. He held a faded bouquet of flowers, eyes full of what seemed like regret, but I no longer trusted such gestures. I was too familiar with lies, with betrayal, to believe that a simple bouquet could change anything. I stepped outside, furious. "What are you doing here? You have no place in my life." He said nothing. That silence cut through me, and my rage erupted like a volcano. I screamed, tears streaming. "You betrayed Mum while she was alive. You betrayed everything I ever believed in. How can you just come back as if nothing happened?" Neighbors probably heard me. Everything around me disappeared, leaving only my shouting and the raw, overwhelming pain inside me. I realized then that my anger wasn't just about him. It was the accumulation of all those years of being abandoned, of taking care of Mum alone while he was gone, of betrayal and of isolation within my own family. I was screaming because I had held it all in for too long. Finally, he spoke, his voice quivering. "Please, I'm sorry. Just hear me out." I scoffed, a bitter, forced smile on my face. "Hear you out? Do you think one explanation can heal the pain you caused? Do you think I could ever trust you again?" I turned to go inside, but he called after me, "Please, give me a chance." But in my heart, that chance had long since vanished. There was no opportunity left. The love and trust I had once given him had died with Mum. Now, all that remained was a choice: to maintain my boundaries, protect myself, and reject any intrusion from the person who had caused me the greatest pain. My anger didn't stop with him. It extended to the woman who had shattered our family, the one he had chosen over Mum. Her presence in my life felt like another knife twisting into an old wound. I wanted no dialogue, no explanation, only to protect myself from coercion and cold rationalizations. In the weeks that followed, I reminded myself that I had to live with this pain. I could not control my father, I could not change the past, but I could control my own life. I threw myself into work, learned complete independence, and leaned on the few friends who truly cared for me so I wouldn't feel entirely alone. I also realized that holding on to anger was not a weakness. It was a survival mechanism, a reminder that what happened could never happen again. Most importantly, I understood that from now on, I had to protect my heart, enforce boundaries, and hold them firmly no matter who tried to break them. That was the hardest lesson I learned at 20. Sometimes love and forgiveness are not obligations. Sometimes survival and self-respect are far more important. I decided that my father and that woman would never have the power to manipulate my feelings or my life again. I held my boundaries, nurtured my anger, and used it as fuel to build a stronger, more independent life. After the intense confrontations with my father and the woman who destroyed our family, I thought I could finally continue my life quietly, with independence and clear boundaries. I focused on school, work, and maintaining relationships that actually mattered. But life never lets you forget the past so easily. One early spring day, I received a call from my aunt. Her voice was tense, but trying to stay calm. "Hey, the family wants to see you. They want to make things right with your dad." A chill ran down my spine. Make things right. After everything that had happened, after the cruel betrayal, after the long months of learning to stand on my own, now they wanted me to forgive and meet my father. I was silent, my mind flooded with a mix of emotions: anger, disappointment, exhaustion, and a trace of fear. But my aunt continued, "They won't force you. It's just a small meeting to talk." I tried to keep my voice steady. "Aunt, I don't want to see him. I've made my decision," she sighed. "They don't fully understand what you've been through. They think time heals everything. You should give your father a chance, and maybe yourself too." Her words felt like knives. I knew she meant well, but sometimes someone's good intentions can be harmful. I made the decision to stand my ground. My father was still dead to me in the following weeks. The pressure from the family intensified. Calls, texts, emails came from my father, uncles, aunts, even distant relatives I'd barely known. Every message carried the same demand: "Give your father a chance, forgive him. The family wants to reunite." I felt trapped. Day after day, the pressure exhausting me to the point of collapse. One evening, my uncle called. His voice was stern. "You need to think about family. Your father, he needs you." I laughed bitterly. "Needs me? He didn't need Mum when she was sick. He didn't need me when I was struggling. And now he says he needs me. No way." But he didn't stop. In the following days, I received messages in different forms. "Come, be with the family. Don't let the past block your happiness. Think about your father, your aunt, all of us." Each line felt like a blade, reopening old wounds that had never healed. During those stressful days, I started questioning myself. Was I being selfish for refusing to see the family? Too rigid for refusing forgiveness? I reflected deeply, but at my core, my stance remained unchanged. Forgiveness is not a duty. Forgiveness cannot be forced. And I could never forget what had happened. One day, my aunt called, crying, The family is heartbroken. Your father? He's suffering. You're his daughter, please. Give him a chance." I felt a tightness in my throat, but not from pity, rather, from the long-buried anger and helplessness. I replied coldly, "Aunt, my father is dead to me. He has no more chances. I live for myself, not for him, not for the family." That was the first time I clearly stated my boundaries to my aunt. After that call, I felt a sense of relief, but the pressure from others didn't stop. Invitations from distant relatives, messages urging me to join family gatherings, even subtle manipulations. "We are a family. Come and make peace." I began to realize that family, whether well-meaning or not, can be the most intense source of pressure. They use blood ties to manipulate emotions, using the idea of family to force compliance. I felt trapped in a web I couldn't escape, where any refusal was judged as selfish, disrespectful, or stubborn. But it was within that pressure that I learned to stand firm. I refused to meet my father or the woman who broke our family. I stayed away from forced family gatherings. I protected my personal boundaries and refused any emotional manipulation. I also learned to decline calls, texts, and emails without guilt. Each time I picked up the phone and hung up, I felt stronger. I realized that growing up isn't just about enduring pain. It's also about protecting your soul from the pressures of others. One evening, I decided to write a letter to my father, not to forgive, not to explain, but to firmly establish my boundaries one last time. Father, I have decided never to see you again. Any attempts to contact me, any invitations, are rejected. I live for myself, not for you, not for the family. This is my final decision. Do not disturb me again. After sending it, I felt as if a heavy weight had been lifted. No more nagging, no more emotional manipulation. I could finally live for myself, focusing on school, work, and healthy relationships. Yet, the family's judgment and whispers still lingered. They criticized me, tried to pull others into pressuring me to change my mind. But I learned to filter what mattered, leaving only what was necessary for my well-being. I stood firm, refusing to lose myself in a web of emotional pressure. 2 years after I left my father's house, my life had settled somewhat. I had a steady job, close friends, and a private space where I could breathe. I thought that everything related to my father and that woman was a past I no longer needed to touch. But life never lets you forget so easily. One late summer day, I received a thick envelope from the family. It was an invitation to my father's wedding with the woman who had once been Mum's friend, the same woman he had betrayed. My mother while she was alive. My hands trembled as I held the invitation. My heart raced with anger and fear. The family was trying again to drag me into a situation I didn't want to be part of. Things became even more tense when my aunt called, urging me, please. Your father would be so happy if you came. Just once, to make things peaceful. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me, Aunt. I will never go. I've made myself clear. He is dead to me. She was silent for a moment, then sighed. You're so stubborn. But think carefully. Family, family is important. I knew she meant well, but the importance she spoke of was just emotional pressure, something I had learned to avoid. I decided to stand firm. I would not go, and I knew the family would not easily accept my decision. On the day of the wedding, the family knew my address and began trying to coax me out. I received countless texts, calls, even messages from distant relatives I'd never spoken to. Every one urged me, come be with the family. Just once, your father is suffering. You're his daughter, don't abandon him. Each message hit like a blade, reopening old wounds that had never fully healed. I felt trapped, but I knew I could not falter. I was used to protecting myself from my father's manipulation and from others' emotional pressure. That night, I sat alone in my small apartment, the warm yellow light casting shadows across my face. I reminded myself, no, this time I will not back down. No one has the right to force me to forgive or see him again. The mix of anger and determination became a source of strength, keeping me resolute. The next morning, as I was getting ready for work, my father appeared at my door, holding a large bouquet of flowers, eyes red. My heart froze, and memories of Mum and all the pain from 2 years ago came rushing back. He stepped closer, voice trembling. "Please, I want you to come to the wedding. Just once, for me, for us." I drew a deep breath, trying to contain the fury boiling inside. It's too late. There's no chance left. I live for myself, not for you, not for that woman. He stood there, speechless, eyes filled with both guilt and despair. I could see the desperation, but it did not lessen my anger. I had learned not to let his emotions control me anymore. The confrontation escalated when the woman appeared. She looked at me with contempt, a mocking smile on her lips. "Still won't forgive your father?" "You're so stubborn," I replied, my voice icy. "You are not my mother. You have no place in my life. I don't want to see you, I don't want to speak to you, and I don't want you in my life at all." My father stood there, helpless. She turned away, and I felt a small sense of relief. I realized that my strength did not come from forgiveness or compromise, came from standing firm in my boundaries. Eventually, my father left. No more pleading, no more direct pressure. I stood there, taking deep breaths, feeling each heartbeat, each surge of energy. I knew the past would never fully release its hold on life, but I had learned how to face it without letting it control me. That day marked a significant turning point. I not only refused to forgive, but also asserted control over my life and emotions. I understood that growing up is not about forgetting the past, it's about standing strong amid emotional storms and protecting oneself from those unworthy of control. After the wedding, the atmosphere around me felt heavy with pressure. Even though I had refused to attend, I still received texts and calls from family members trying to drag me back into a story I had stepped away from. "You're his daughter. Think of your father. The family hopes you'll change your mind. Don't let the past control your life." Every message reminded me of old pain, of the betrayal I had endured, and of the months I had spent learning to stand on my own in the following days. A profound sense of loneliness rose within me, not because I lacked friends or loved ones, but because I was walking a path few could understand. I learned that protecting my boundaries sometimes meant facing distance, misunderstanding, and judgment from those around me. One autumn morning, as sunlight streamed through my window, I sat at my desk and looked out onto the busy street. Children laughing, cars passing. Everything outside seemed completely detached from the world of pressure and hurt I had just lived through. I realized I needed to accept that the past couldn't be changed, and that those who caused me pain could no longer control me. To begin the process of healing, I turned to practices that helped me balance my mind. I started keeping a daily journal, writing down my emotions: anger, fear, small moments of peace. Writing my thoughts not only relieved stress, but also gave me a clearer perspective on myself, what I needed, and what I could never forgive. Alongside journaling, I joined yoga and meditation classes. At first, I felt restless, my mind refusing to calm. But gradually, each deep breath, each slow movement helped me connect with my body and my true emotions. I realized that anger and pain didn't need to be suppressed or buried. They could be recognized, understood, and slowly transformed. One of the most important steps was learning to forgive myself. I realized that for years, I had carried guilt for being angry at my father, for refusing forgiveness, and for keeping distance from family. Now, I understood that maintaining my boundaries and refusing to forgive those undeserving was the strongest form of self-love. I wasn't responsible for the mistakes of others, nor did I need to prove my generosity or forgiveness to anyone. One day, I met an old friend who had known my story for years. We walked through the park as golden leaves drifted to the ground, and I shared all the pent-up feelings, anger, disappointment, loneliness, and the small steps I was taking toward healing. He listened without judgment, occasionally placing a hand on my shoulder as if to transmit calm energy. I realized that healing doesn't always require facing everything alone. Sometimes, just having someone to listen and understand is enough. In the following weeks, I focused on building healthy habits, morning walks, reading, meditation, and keeping in touch with people who truly cared for me. I also learned to recognize family messages that violated my boundaries and to reject them firmly without guilt. Gradually, I noticed a profound change. The anger was still there, but it no longer consumed my thoughts. I felt calmer when thinking about my father and that woman, able to reflect on the past without being swept away by emotion. I realized that healing isn't about erasing pain, it's about learning to live with it, allowing myself to be happy despite it. One evening, sitting on the balcony under a sky full of stars, I told myself, I survived. I'm still standing. I'm not the hurt girl of 17 anymore. Now, I am the one in control of my life. That statement wasn't just self-talk, it was a declaration. I had the right to live fully, to love myself, and to choose relationships that truly added value to my life. After years of healing, I gradually learned how to choose people who were truly trustworthy and worth sharing my life with. Old friends, those who had been there when I was alone, had become a strong foundation I could rely on. But this time, I wanted to try opening my heart not just to friendship, but to a potential romantic relationship. My first encounter with Alex happened in an art class I was attending. He had an easy smile, attentive eyes, and a patience that allowed me not to reveal my entire story immediately. We talked about books, music, and seemingly simple interests that had become precious to me. Yet even in the calm I felt with Alex, old worries crept in. I questioned myself. Was I being too cautious? Could I trust another man without fearing betrayal, abandonment, or being taken advantage of as my father had done with Mum and with me? These thoughts sometimes made me pull back, and at times I felt guilty for trying to open my heart at all. Alex was patient. He never pressured me, never demanded my past stories, only listened when I chose to speak. Slowly, I realized that trust isn't a reckless leap, it's a process. I learned to set boundaries, to recognize behaviors worthy of trust, and most importantly, to identify when old fears were creeping in without any basis in reality. One of the biggest challenges came when my family learned about this new relationship. They didn't intervene directly as before, but subtle remarks and careful questions about this new man kept me on guard. Are you sure he's a good person? Or don't open your heart too quickly. Each comment reminded me of the past, of unhealed wounds, and the responsibility I felt to judge others wisely. One evening, when Alex took me to an art exhibition, I realized I was laughing genuinely, speaking freely without feeling watched or judged. I understood that I was beginning to trust again that there were still good people in the world, and not every relationship leads to pain. However, the greatest challenge was internal. Every time I grew closer to Alex, memories of the past, my father, my mother, the betrayal, the family's pressure suddenly surged. I felt torn, wanting to open up, yet fearing hurt, wanting to trust, yet fearing loss of control. I realized I needed to confront this fear directly. I wrote in my journal, analyzed my emotions, and identified the signs of the past trying to manipulate my present. I learned to say to Alex, "Sometimes I'm scared, and it's not about you. It's my past." He always responded with patience, a gentle smile, and genuine listening. Gradually, I understood that maturity isn't just about standing strong alone, it's about learning to trust the right people, sharing without fear, and distinguishing past fears from present reality. I learned to see love as a partnership, not a struggle to defend myself from pain. My relationship with Alex also helped me reevaluate other relationships in my life. I became more discerning with people who might cause harm, but also more open to those who were sincere and trustworthy. I learned that intimacy is my right, but safety and boundaries are equally mine. Over the following months, I noticed a new sense of peace. I no longer worried about texts from family, nor felt controlled by the past. I realized that healing is a long journey, but small steps, little joys, and healthy relationships can create profound change. One evening, sitting on the balcony under a star-filled sky, I told myself, I survived. I'm still standing. I'm not the hurt 17-year-old girl anymore. Now, I am in control of my life. That wasn't just self-talk, it was a declaration. I have the right to live fully, to love myself, and to choose relationships that genuinely enrich my life. After years of learning to stand strong, to protect my boundaries, and to cautiously open myself to healthy relationships, I had convinced myself that I had finally escaped the shadows of the past. I thought I had learned all I needed to survive, to grow, to heal. But life has a way of reminding you that the past doesn't simply fade away like a distant memory. It lingers, hidden in the corners of your mind, waiting for a moment when you think you've forgotten, only to come rushing back, demanding attention. Sometimes, to truly grow, you have no choice but to face it head-on. I remember the day vividly. A strange message arrived from a family member. Your father wants to see you. He wants to talk once, to put everything to rest. My heart skipped a beat. I had spent years convincing myself I would never, ever speak to him again. The thought of hearing his voice, of sitting across from him, made my stomach churn with anxiety and rage. And yet, a small, quieter part of me, the part that longed to close the circle of pain and understand what remained unresolved, hesitated. That part of me, the cautious but curious one, wondered if maybe, just maybe, this meeting could offer closure. The cafe we agreed on was small and tucked away, cozy yet private enough to keep prying eyes at bay. I arrived early, as usual, when my nerves refused to calm themselves. The aroma of coffee filled the air, mingling with the soft chatter of strangers. I tried to focus on the steam rising from my cup, on the warmth of the ceramic in my hands, but my mind kept drifting back to him. My father, the man who had been absent when I needed him most, whose betrayal had left wounds that refused to fully heal. My heart pounded in my chest, my throat felt tight and dry. When he walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. Time had aged him, added lines and wariness. And yet the image of him in my memory was sharp and clear, the same man whose choices had caused so much pain. But the girl who had remembered him, that worth a weak, heartbroken 17-year-old, was gone. I was no longer her. I had grown, hardened, and learned to protect myself. He approached slowly, hesitating, eyes avoiding mine for a brief moment before settling. His voice trembled as he spoke. I want to apologize. I know I was wrong. I betrayed your mother. I betrayed you. And now I want to do something too. Make things right. For a moment, I simply stared at him, my mind a storm of conflicting emotions. Anger surged, as raw and fierce as it had been when I first discovered his betrayal. Disappointment gnawed at me, the years of absence and dishonesty weighing heavily on my chest. And yet, beneath it all, there was a strange, almost surreal calm. I had learned to recognize manipulation, to see through guilt and remorse, and to guard my own emotional state. I took a deep, deliberate breath. "What you did is the past," I said finally, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "An apology won't change that. I haven't forgotten, and I cannot forgive, at least, not now." He lowered his head, the lines of remorse etching deeper across his face. I could see the sincerity there. I could feel it in the way his hands trembled slightly as they rested on the table. But it did nothing to lessen the anger burning inside me. I realized then that forgiveness is not mandatory, and that maturity often means standing firm in your convictions. Even in the face of another person's emotional pleas, the conversation dragged on, filled with hesitant explanations, attempts to justify his choices, the pressures of work, the mistakes, the relationships that had gone wrong. But to me, these reasons were just noise. Background static that did nothing to alter the reality I had lived, a reality of absence, betrayal, and grief. I listened carefully, not to absorb or forgive, but simply to understand, to witness. One of the moments that tightened the air between us came when he spoke of my mother. His voice wavered. "I know she was wonderful, and I didn't deserve her. But you have to understand." I was confused, and now I shook my head, cutting him off, my voice firm, unwavering. "No excuses. Mum is gone, and you chose to betray her when she needed you most. No words can make up for that. I don't want to hear more reasons." Silence fell between us, heavy and final. No manipulation, no pleading, no attempts to sway me. For the first time in years, I felt it. Freedom. Freedom to keep my distance, to protect my own heart, to claim the life I had built for myself independent of him. After leaving the cafe, I wandered alone into the park, where golden leaves drifted lazily across winding paths. A soft breeze whispered through the trees, rustling the branches, carrying with it a sense of calm I had not known I was capable of feeling. And in that quiet, I realized something profound. Confronting the past is not about immediate forgiveness. It's not about absolving those who have wronged you. It's about freeing yourself from the chains of pain, reclaiming the space your emotions deserve, and allowing yourself the right to live fully for your own happiness, not for someone else's guilt or desire for absolution. In the days that followed, I noticed a subtle, rare sense of relief settling into my bones. My family continued to reach out, offering advice or subtle pressure, but I had learned to set boundaries clearly and decisively. I responded briefly when necessary, firmly but politely, refusing to be drawn into futile arguments or emotional games. The control I had over my life, over my responses, over my own emotions, became a source of quiet power I had never known before. As I walked through my neighborhood, I began noticing small details I had missed for years, the way sunlight filtered through the leaves, the gentle hum of traffic in the distance, the way people smiled at each other without knowing the stories we all carried inside. These small observations, once overlooked, now felt like tiny affirmations that life could be gentle, that peace could be found even after heartbreak, and slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, I began to understand that healing is not a straight line. It is messy, uneven, filled with setbacks, but every step, no matter how small, is progress. I learned to forgive myself for holding on too tightly, for feeling anger too deeply, for needing years to understand what I deserved. Each day, I reclaimed a little more of myself. Each day, I let go of the weight I had carried too long, sitting on a bench in the park, watching the world move around me. I realized that the past, with all its hurt and betrayal, had shaped me, but it did not define me. I could remember without pain. I could honor the memory of those I loved without letting their absence dictate my happiness. And I could finally breathe without carrying the burden of resentment. Freedom, I learned, was not escaping him, or even escaping the past. It was embracing myself fully. It was choosing to stand tall, to live boldly, and to love deeply, but only in ways that nourished me. For the first time in years, I felt that I could truly breathe, that I could step into a future unburdened by old ghosts, and that I was, finally, the person I was always meant to be. 10 years have passed since my mother died. 10 years that felt both endlessly long and yet incredibly fleeting when I look back on the journey from the angry, despairing 17-year-old girl to the 27-year-old woman sitting in her small apartment, watching the sunset paint the city in gold. Those 10 years taught me how to love myself, how to set boundaries, how to choose relationships wisely, and, most importantly, that the past, no matter how painful, cannot dictate my happiness unless I let it after leaving home. I experienced an ocean of emotions: anger, loss, loneliness, and deep despair. The first years after leaving my father were the hardest. I had to stand on my own, take care of myself, and learn to confront the pain that I had previously shared only with family. And yet, those struggles forged a resilience within me, a strength that allowed me to take responsibility for my life and make choices that honored my own needs. Remember long nights spent alone in my room, holding a warm cup of tea, staring out the window, my mind flooded with memories of my mother, the smell of the tea, the golden glow of the lamp, the whispering wind outside. What came moments for me to talk to myself, to understand that pain is a part of life, but it is not all there is. I learned to cry, to let go, and, most importantly, to accept myself with all my emotions, whether it was anger, grief, or heartbreak. When I confronted my father for the first time in years, I realized that maturity doesn't mean immediate forgiveness. I listened, recognizing the remorse in his eyes, but I did not let it manipulate me. I understood that forgiveness is my right, not my obligation, and sometimes being an adult is standing firm, protecting yourself, and knowing that your happiness does not depend on someone else's regret or need for absolution. My relationship with Alex opened a new chapter in my life. He wasn't just a companion. He became a guide in teaching me how to trust without fear and how to open my heart while maintaining boundaries. I realized that love is not weakness, it is a process of learning about oneself and others. Simple evenings, walking together, long conversations about ordinary things, and moments of laughter all became essential pieces in the mosaic of the happiness I had once thought unattainable. Day by day, I came to understand that growth does not mean erasing painful memories. It means learning to live with them peacefully. I no longer view the past through anger or sorrow. I view it with understanding and gratitude, recognizing that it made me stronger and more resilient. I learned to tell myself, every wound is a lesson. Every step forward is a victory. Every moment of peace is a reward for patience and endurance. One afternoon, I walked through a familiar park, the same place where I had once cried, run away, and sought comfort in the first years after leaving home. This time, I paused amid the green trees, took a deep breath, and watched children laughing and running around. I felt joy in its simplest form, and freedom in every breath. For the first time, I experienced a deep, abiding peace no longer controlled by the past, no longer captive to pain. In the days that followed, I began journaling more consistently, not just recording events, but capturing my emotions, thoughts, and dreams for the future. Writing allowed me to see myself clearly, to understand my worth, and to recognize the boundaries I needed to maintain in my relationships. I also began participating in community activities, helping those in need, and sharing my story with young people who had faced similar loss. Every time I saw their smiles, heard them say that my story gave them strength, I realized that the power of one's experiences not only heals oneself but also inspires others. Sitting on my balcony one star-filled evening, I felt a serenity wash over me. I whispered to myself, I survived. I am still standing. I am no longer the hurt 17-year-old girl. Now I am in control of my life. These were not just words, they were a declaration. I have the right to live fully, to love myself, and to choose relationships that genuinely enrich my life. This conclusion is not a perfect ending for everyone. There is no reconciliation with my father. There is no magical erasure of the pain, but it is an ending for my journey of growth, inner freedom, and peace. I know challenges lie ahead, but now I possess the tools, resilience, and courage to face them. I have learned to stand firmly, to love myself, and to create my own happiness. Looking back over 10 years from the hopeless girl at 17 to the strong, hopeful woman at 27, I see a journey through storms, through heartbreak, through self-forgiveness, and choosing what is worthy. I am no longer the girl who was broken by loss. I am a grown woman, strong, resilient, and full of hope for the future. And as the city lights begin to glow, I know that a new chapter of life has begun. A chapter that I write myself, with my own hands, heart, and mind, a chapter of freedom, peace, and true happiness, where the past is only a story I carry with me, and the future is a life I am free to shape. For the first time in years, I can fully embrace the present. I can laugh without guilt, plan without fear, and love without hesitation. I have discovered that true power lies not in erasing the past, but in choosing how it shapes me, and I choose strength, resilience, and joy. This is not just the end of a story, is the beginning of a life truly lived. Every scar, every tear, every moment of pain has led to this, a self who stands strong, who cherishes peace, who embraces freedom, and who knows, deep in her heart, that she is deserving of all the love and happiness the world has to offer. And under the blanket of night, as stars twinkle above and city lights shimmer below, I feel a deep, profound gratitude, not for the ease of my journey, but for the courage to walk it, for the growth that emerged from the ashes, and for the person I have become. I am whole, I am free, and I am ready for everything that comes next.